Now going to our next panel, which will be moderated by Drew Holzapfel of the Global CEOI and Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative, who will lead a discussion on the lived experience of individuals post-diagnosis. We'll learn from him and our esteemed group of panelists about ways to manage symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, how to reduce risk across the care continuum, and how these strategies differ across high, medium, and low resource settings around the world. Over to you, Drew.
Great. Well, thank you very much, George. Appreciate it. And just so everybody knows, I'm stepping in here for Wendy Widener, who is our great partner at Alzheimer's Disease International, who had a last-minute emergency. So excited to have this panel of experts who are really focused on what we can do here and now to make impact on the lives of people who are living with Alzheimer's disease, impacted by Alzheimer's disease today. So looking forward to hearing from this group about how we're approaching it, what we can do immediately to make a difference. So I'm going to ask each panelist to give a brief introduction, then we'll go into some questions and conversation. So to start the introductions, I'll start with you, Keith.
Thank you, Drew. Hello, everyone, wherever you are connecting to this event. My name is Keith Oliver, and I live in Canterbury in the UK with my wife. I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease almost 11 years ago at the age of 55, at which point my 33-year career as a school principal and education advisor came to an end. After reassessing my life after the diagnosis, I began in 2011 to embark upon refocusing my desire to contribute to society so that instead of educating children and teachers, I now help educate people in the world of dementia. I'm an Alzheimer's Society ambassador and the UK's first dementia envoy. I have a passion for supporting dementia research into care and public health. And in this capacity, I attended the ADI conference in Chicago when speaking on behalf of the Three Nations Dementia Working Group and the IDEAL Project based in Exeter University. And I'm delighted to be part of this panel today. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Serge.
Bonjour, good morning or good afternoon. My name is Serge Gauthier. I'm a neurologist at McGill University. I have worked over the years on developing new ways to measure changes over time in dementia and finding medications that can help. And I have a special interest in behavior measures and management in dementia. Today, I will have an opportunity to share with you some of our findings in the World Alzheimer Report 2021 about diagnosis of dementia, and look at what's coming up for the next report in September 2022 about post-diagnosis management. Thank you for being there.
Thank you, Serge. Mary.
Hi there, I'm Mary Michael. I'm the Vice President of Patient Advocacy and Stakeholder Management at Otsuka America Pharmaceutical, but I'm also pleased to sit on this panel, also representing the Global Council on Alzheimer's Disease, which is a coalition that we've built over the last several years, looking at what can be done now in support of all the individuals that are impacted by Alzheimer's disease. And we are specifically interested in discussing or understanding the weight and the burden of agitation and other behavioral symptoms associated with Alzheimer's disease. I'm so pleased to be here, and I wanted to share with you in our conversation some social listening and other data that I think that you'll find sort of novel as part of this discussion. Thank you, Drew.
Looking forward to it. And last but not least, Adesola.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Adesola Oguniyi. I'm a neurologist. I work in Nigeria at University College Hospital, Ibadan. I'm a professor of medicine, and I'm been involved with dementia research for about 30 years. I'll talk about what we've done on epidemiology of dementia and share experience with cognitive stimulation therapy. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
It's always great to have you. So we have the UK, Canada, the US, and Nigeria represented. Adesola helped us kick off the Davos Alzheimer's collaborative work at the beginning of this year. It's good to see you again. So I wanted to start with a first question to Keith. Keith, one of the things that I know we would like to focus in on is using strategies along the care continuum. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on care planning and how this can help someone manage their condition?
Yes, thank you. In many ways, to sort of set the scene, my care plan is quite different from that of many patients with dementia, in that it was co-produced and created by a consultant psychiatrist and me, based upon a model I created and he supported. Thus, it is genuinely person-centered. It was not always thus, though, because it took 4 years and 2 previous consultants to get, and then 20 minutes to initially create. The plan works on headings such as what, when, where, who, why, how, impact or outcome, and time frame. So if you can imagine a piece of paper with those headings along the top, what is the person going to get? When are they going to get it? Where is it going to be held or given to them? Who's going to deliver it? Why are they having it? How is it going to make a difference to their well-being and their health? What's the impact going to be? And what is the time frame to review it to see if it's working or not? So that's the basic construct of my care plan. It's written on 2 sides of A4 paper, so it's manageable to both myself and any professional who is involved in the plan. It is multi-agency and multidisciplinary and monitored by myself continuously and with my consultant every 4 months. My GP gets a copy every 4 months, but then plays a relatively small role in the delivery of the plan. It's a blend of psychosocial and pharmacological, and is designed to maintain my well-being and sense of selfhood, which is crucial if I'm to live as well as possible. Just picking out a few examples from the care plan. First of all, it has within it my role as an ambassador or an envoy, because I see that as very much part of my maintenance of my well-being. It gives me self-esteem, maintains my self-esteem, and it enables me to feel valued and part of a wider society, which I've joined since being diagnosed. I receive a lot of support from undergraduate students who are on placement with the NHS and with the third sector in the area where I live. And this retains for me a sense of developing the skills of young people, which is part of what a teacher, of course, should do. So my plan isn't only set in the today, it draws from yesterday as well. The plan also identifies some of the overarching key challenges that I face and confront with my Alzheimer's, and it then relates the interventions to helping to address this. So I hope that gives the audience some sense of how my care plan works for me.
Keith, I thought that was fantastic. First and foremost, thank you for being an envoy. I think that was a really important point you made. It's an important role. Your plan sounds very practical, and it sounds very coordinated across many different sites of care or many different stakeholders helping provide care. So I'd like to go to Serge. Serge, as a practicing clinician and somebody who thinks a lot about post-diagnostic support, can you explain about your role in providing post-diagnostic support? And you mentioned the World Alzheimer's reports that you've been a part of. Any insights from the research you've done there would be welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm so impressed with Keith's program. I wish we could do that for everyone. So you probably had to look for the right person to be able to develop such a program. I'll just add that the kind of care program you outline, we need to do that also for the family members or the carers. And most people with Alzheimer's disease after a number of years, it's the load is slightly larger for the carer than for the person living with dementia. As far as the clinicians, we just wrote about diagnosis. It will get a little easier in the near future. We're talking about 1 or 2 year time horizon, so that's very soon, in the sense that we will have new tools for cognitive assessment remotely. We could do part of the pre-clinical visit work remotely with cognitive assessments that are appropriate for the language and the culture of the individual doing the test. Of course, we're talking here about very early diagnosis in the course of dementia, but we predict the tsunami coming is the baby boomers, people over 60 who will want to have an assessment of their cognition, because there will be new treatments that may slow down progression significantly if the treatments are given early enough. The other positive thing about diagnosis is there are blood tests that are emerging as useful, the equivalent of the glucose levels for diabetes. There will be something called p-tau or phosphotau isoforms, fragments of the tau proteins in the brain that we can find in the blood. And this would be a non-invasive, hopefully low cost, affordable around the world confirmatory test. It won't replace the clinical assessment, but it will help the clinician and the person with symptoms and their family know what is the cause of the dementia or the mild cognitive impairment and plan ahead. And finally, as opening remarks, we need both types of clinicians. As you outlined, Keith, very well, you do need a family doctor to take care of concomitant disorders, high blood pressure, maybe irregular heartbeat, maybe diabetes, that are common as you get older. And you need someone who's more dementia focused. And you need to have an interaction between the two. Thank you. Does someone hear Drew?
So I am so sorry about that. Thank you. I was on mute. So Serge, I thought those were great comments. And I know one thing we're going to want to do is come back to you and hear a little bit more about your remote tools that you referenced. But before we do that, I want to go to Mary Michael. Mary, I know you guys, through a variety of mechanisms, really have deep insights into the journey, the person with lived experience, their caregivers, their journey. So could you share with us what you see and what you know and how Otsuka is taking action?
Sure. Thank you, Drew. So, Keith, I want to add on to what you've talked about, and you've come up with such an incredible care plan. But unfortunately, as Serge has mentioned, and I think everybody here and even a lot of our audience can probably agree that that is sort of the outlier as opposed to the norm. What seems to be missing from a lot of conversations is really the role of agitation and other behavioral, changes that we see with individuals with dementia or Alzheimer's. And oftentimes, those symptoms can actually predate the cognition in some cases. And so what we're trying to do is elevate the voice of the community to make that a known sequelae of the condition. So one of the ways that we do this is through social listening. In other words, we look at public forums where individuals living with Alzheimer's and their care partners and loved ones will actually share their voice and their experience and do a lot of storytelling. And once we collect that information, then we do, we'll conduct qualitative interviews with individuals like Keith and maybe his care partner to say how accurate or how does this reflect your experience and your journey. And we understand that everyone's journey is individualized. However, there are some themes that kind of come up. The other thing that we wanted to understand, and Serge, you mentioned this a little bit about the importance of having not only the specialist that's, dementia focused or cognitive, impairment focused, but also the general practitioner or primary care physician. And one of the things that we did was we actually surveyed 100 primary care physicians to see how accurate and what their perception of agitation or agitation symptoms were. And 85% reported behavioral issues as the main concern of patients, second only to cognition. And I think that's a very important distinction that we have to keep in mind. And the challenge is even greater for care partners, as you can imagine, because sometimes they're observing these changes and they're reporting it to the primary care, physician or practitioner. So in a separate survey of PCPs and neurologists, what we found was that 68% of primary care physicians or practitioners and 35% of neurologists reported behavioral and psychosocial symptoms of dementia as the symptom for which people living with dementia and their care partners most frequently seek support. Because I think with cognition, there are, certainly supportive tools that can be used in place now. We have wonderful technology solutions and things like that. However, when it comes to these behavioral changes, they're really looking for other types of support for individuals. And oftentimes it is non-pharmacologic. So I did want to just share some of those insights with you.
It's really great data. Thank you, Mary. So Adesola, I wanted to come to you. And, in particular, I think it would be interesting to hear just an overview of care and management of people with dementia in Nigeria and some of the challenges that the community faces in delivering the care.
Very much. I'd like to start by congratulating Keith for his career plans. That individualized kind of care is ideal, but that is good in places where you have the manpower to manage patients who understand the disease and where the number of patients are not that many to manage. And a supporting healthcare system to take care of the bills and all that. These are challenges that we have in low and middle income countries where we have limited manpower. We also have fewer patients who have the disease. Most individuals who have dementia are managed in their homes. So family caregivers provide the care. And when they are sick, that's when they come to a hospital. The problem with primary health care workers is that many of them don't recognize the early symptoms of the disease. And so we need to educate them to know about the early manifestations of dementia. When the illness is overt, everybody knows about that, then everybody can suggest ways in which you can manage them. But when in the early stages, when a lot can still be done, not much is done. Most of the care is provided by family members. Health seeking is not that major with us. So what we decided in our situation is to try a kind of reminiscent therapy in the form of cognitive stimulation, which is a form of group therapy in which you bring individuals with dementia, mild to moderate dementia together. And then you remind them of things they have done in the past, names, faces, music, currency, things they have done, things they enjoy doing. And we've shown that with this kind of method, there's improvement in speech, language function, there is reduction in caregiver burden, and overall it seems to work very well, at least in low and middle income countries. But we'll get to a stage where we can have individualized therapy, but that's still a long shot of. And then diagnosis is also a problem. So we need to remember that, as Serge has discussed, all the chemicals in the blood that can be detected, we don't have such facilities in developing countries. Those are areas which we want to go into. But I think I should stop for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this gives us an opportunity to go back to Serge here, because one of the things I heard Adesola say is it's a resource-constrained environment in Nigeria. I think it's a resource-constrained environment across the globe. And the reason why the remote tools caught my ear was maybe that is a mechanism for scaling our support. And so I just wanted to see if you could give us your thoughts on where we stand. What are the remote tools that are helpful? What could be more helpful? What's the general state of using these to support patients and caregivers?
In terms of diagnosis, we now have the minimal behavioral impairment checklist. That is a way to detect early mood and behavior changes even before dementia. The MOCA, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, also available online. These are examples of tools that are used by clinicians for some time, but are now available for a first assessment by people who have concern. And we need to work out who's going to look at the results to tell them you need to have an in-person assessment later. So that's one way to look at new technology. The other thing is through the pandemic years, now plural, Zoom conversations took place with people we already knew, the follow-up of persons with dementia, and it did work out pretty well. But we couldn't do a physical examination, obviously. But we could do the mini mental state examination and limited the numbers of assessments. So all this to say, because of the pandemic, there's been speeding up of telemedicine use to the point where there is a new interest in the neurologists to develop cognitive assessment tools appropriate for the different stages of dementia, starting from minimal cognitive impairment to mild and early moderate stages, and also look at behavior and function. It could be used for diagnosis, but that would need to be complemented by an in-person visit and a physical examination. For the follow-ups, especially if we have new treatments, whether non-pharmacologic or pharmacologic, that could slow down progression, for people living in remote regions or people having physical limitations to go out to the doctor or hospital, there will be a possibility to do follow-up using some of the tools, at least for cognition and some elements of function and behavior.
Thank you. It's very interesting. I know as part of the Davos Alzheimer's collaborative work, we are putting the digital cognitive assessment in a number of healthcare systems. And having that digital healthcare assessment result be actionable by somebody in the healthcare system also requires some training of the healthcare system. So I take your point. I thought and all that was excellent. I just want to go back to Keith. Keith, I want to come to you with the second question here. It's been shared with me that creativity is very important to you. And so I'm curious in what ways has remaining creative helped you, and what can we learn from this?
Yeah, in thinking through this question prior to the webinar, I did go back to my care plan, which I think in a sense is a creative document. You know, it was created by myself with the consultant. And it's a sense of trying to solve a problem. So first of all, I see creativity as being a tool I use to problem solve. That's first and foremost. It inspires my thinking and it directs my thinking. Secondly, it gives me a sense of challenge and achievement. I share creativity with my wife, so it's something we both enjoy doing, both separately and together, and then enjoying the fruits of our labours, and then sharing it further with family, friends, and a wider network, and receiving constructive feedback by way of praise and suggestions to improve. I can then take that into wider living. I think it also enables me to step back into my old shoes, which I occupied as a professional. That's important to me because it helps me maintain my sense of self. It builds resilience by way of enabling me to do things in my way, often from my imagination, or by way of seeing, relating to, responding to, influencing and interpreting the world in which I live. And I've known many people with Alzheimer's and dementia, including my mother, who developed it in her late 70s and 80s and died with it aged 82. And I see how her better days were days when she was inspired by some creative activities within the care home where she lived. It's fun, it's relaxing, it's enjoyable. It takes me away from some of the more serious activities in life, including my advocacy, my volunteering, my activist, my ambassadorial roles, which are important to me, but I need that counterbalance to enable me to continue doing them. It enables me to better understand the creativity in others and to appreciate and nurture the talents of others. And that was part of my role as a teacher and then as a school principal. I can now do that in the roles that I occupy through creativity. It enables me to maintain creative interests that I've had for years, for example, photography, but also to take on new ones, such as art, and in my case, that's watercolour. And until April of this year, I hadn't painted a picture since I was the age 11. So between the age of 11 and 65, I never painted a picture. But since April, I seem to be painting them every week. And so this is something completely new to me. And also interests which are creative that I've dabbled in over the years. And it's reawakened those that have remained dormant, such as writing. I enjoy writing now. I find that very stimulating, and then sharing the writing with others. And lastly, for me, I think it's important on the subject of expectations, because so often when someone has dementia, expectations placed upon us, understandably to an extent, as the disease progresses, are not always as high as we may wish them to be, or we may feel we're capable of. So with creativity, it enables me to challenge some of those low expectations that perhaps are placed on people with dementia, and then to deal with some of the frustrations that I encounter each day. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, thank you. We've mentioned how much thought has gone into your care plan and what a thoughtful approach you're taking. So I just want to go back to our two clinicians on the line here, Serge and Adesola, and just can you help us? And maybe we'll start with Serge and then go to Adesola, but. What are the basic elements of a post-diagnostic care plan? So I'll start with Serge, and Adesola, your thoughts are welcome as well.
I'll just add a compliment to what Keith was saying. It's never too late to have creative activities throughout the course of the disease, even in the stage where you cannot live alone safely. Music and dancing can still make you happy, and there's always. And take into account what the person used to like before.
Yeah.
So you can bring back some good memories and create a good day, as you were saying. In terms of the specific question from Drew, it's up to each clinician based on his or her commitment to do the long-term follow-up. Hopefully this will change, but currently specialists like neurologists, most of us tend to do just a diagnosis and then you go back to your family doctor and good luck. This is, of course, not ideal. And we need to work out an interaction, as Keith has done so well, between the family doctor group. It could be more than one family doctor. It could be as a group with a nurse helping field the calls and the specialist, especially if we have new treatments that require biological treatments such as infusions intravenously, etc. It will make treatment more complex. Oncology, like a course of 1-year treatment that will require more frequent visits. But for now, the plan of treatment has to cover the immediate needs of the person, depending what stage they're at in their disease, and the need of the family. Education, I think, is the first thing the clinician must address after diagnosis. So at McGill, we just started a booklet that is given immediately to the people interested. Half of the booklet is for persons with early symptoms, living with dementia, and the other half is for the family member. So they know more about the stages and plan ahead. It gets into the financial planning, house security planning, etc. We're not sure yet if it's too much information at once. Time will tell. But this is available online for free, and we're going to translate from the original French and English to multiple languages, including Portuguese, Spanish, and Mandarin. The other consideration, and I'll stop there to hear from Dr. Adesola, is should you try a medication now? This is always satisfying for the clinician that you can give a prescription, you do something concrete right away, and essentially you treat the symptoms that are most problematic. As Mary was saying, it could be behavior changes, depression. So an antidepressant is often the first medicine we offer to someone with mild or moderate dementia, depending on their need. And second thing to try if there's no depression is a cholinesterase inhibitor, one of the older drugs now available for 10, 15 years to increase acetylcholine brain content. That may help stabilize symptoms for 1 or 2 years. And then we adjust depending on the need of the person throughout the years. Thank you.
Thank you. Adesola, your thoughts?
Thank you very much. Our own approach to management is not different from what Serge has described. We start with educating family members about the illness and how they can come in to assist the person and provide care and to ensure that they avoid injuries as much as possible. Then we do symptomatic treatment. Usually if it's memory, then we use the anticholinesterase medications if they're available. If it's not memory, then we're a bit handicapped. If it's language problem, then we refer them to speech therapists and see if they can get some assistance from that. Thereafter, we then handle behavioral problems. Some of them tend to be aggressive. So we sometimes have to use antipsychotic drugs, but we have to be sure that the side effects do not outweigh the benefits of whatever medications we are giving. Then we look after comorbidities, hypertension, diabetes, some of the problems that they have, and we try to handle comorbidities. Then we do family support. We also ensure that we provide support for areas like sphincteric issues, where they are very incontinent. We have to teach them on how to manage urine and other wastes so that they don't become a nuisance or create problems for family members, and feeding patterns and all that. And medications that may be necessary as they are available, those are the things that we tend to use. And that's the general approach. But the important thing is to educate family members about the illness and to provide necessary support. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mary, I want to come to you here. We've been talking about care planning. So can you talk a little bit about the role of advanced directives in care planning and how these specifically can be used to address and plan for behavioral changes due to Alzheimer's?
Sure. So, in our research, what we found that while advanced directives are oftentimes used, there is a new psychiatric advanced directive that the American Psychiatric Association has been promoting, or at least showcasing, that's available. And what this allows the individual and the family is really to have these conversations so that the individual living with Alzheimer's or dementia and, or quite frankly, it was really created for individuals with serious and persistent mental illness, that they could voice their preference for what future treatment could look like. So we're wondering if there's a way that families could actually leverage what's existing in other categories so that individuals can really make their preferences known. I love the fact that Keith and our two clinicians talked about informing and educating the family members and the care partners. And what I would do is I would invite anybody to go to our gcad.net website. And what we've done is we've created webisodes around having the conversation about seeking clinical advice just to see if somebody has Alzheimer's or cognitive issues. And it walks the family journey right up into the time of diagnosis. And then we also have some whiteboard animations that are really derived from the voice of the community. lived experience as well as the care partners, so that families can be informed about those symptoms that they might see in their loved ones. And so we invite, just as Serge has, I love the booklet that you were talking about that you've digitized, which I really want to get a hold of. And Andesol, I love what you're talking about, activities of daily living to make sure that individuals are kept clean and hygienic through their journey, and family members how to support those activities. And that's really what we're trying to do with Global Council on Alzheimer's Disease. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. Quite frankly, we're trying to see where all these disparate tools and resources are, so that anybody that comes into our website can go to them, so that hopefully they'll be as informed and proactive as Keith. And one last thing I just want to mention, Keith, I think the thing that you've described, which is so inspiring to me personally and professionally, is that you're really living your best life. And you have moved on. You're hacking your condition, like many people who have other conditions like diabetes or cancer or hypertension or whatever it might be. So I love that hopefulness and roadmap that you've kind of shared. And, you're kind of coming back into your own with your love of art. So thank you so much for sharing that personal perspective.
I personally would like to see some of the pictures, Keith. So maybe we can try to do that at some point. But I do want to come back to you with another question, Keith, if you don't mind. You've mentioned social prescribing to us before. Can you tell us, first of all, what it is and how this has helped you?
Yeah, well, it's difficult to sort of describe it in a world conference in a sense, because I guess each nation is developing social prescribing in different ways. But my experience based in the UK is that it's part of the treatment toolkit that's available to practitioners and hopefully then available to patients to the benefit of their well-being and their health. I think it's a relatively new concept and a new area that's being developed. And I see it as extremely important because it enables people like me to maintain their health and well-being as much as any kind of medication. Because whilst health supplements and vaccines and vitamin supplements and things like that can be proactive and help us stay well, I guess most medications are a response to a health condition or an illness or a disease, and then they hopefully put us back on the right track again to being well. Now, social prescribing I see as something completely different, that it is something that the intervention is there before the need, so to speak, or before the need gets so severe that the potential benefits of the intervention are going to be minimised. I feel that there needs to be more research into the short and long-term benefits of social prescribed interventions and treatments. For example, talked a bit this afternoon about creativity. Well, creativity lends itself very much to social prescribing by way of the arts, by way of music, by way of dance, also through physical activity, going on walks, for example, both in a group where you've got the interactions and the social connections, but also the physical exercise. Not everybody would necessarily be motivated to do it without that encouragement by way of someone suggesting it or prescribing it for them. And then monitoring it to see if it's having the benefits that the patient can derive. I think also it's important to use it at the earliest possible point in the dementia pathway. So often, I guess, social prescribing and activities are done, let's say, for example, in care homes, which do have a great value, but sometimes one wonders if they were prescribed sooner and made available to people sooner, maybe the benefits would have been even greater. I'm talking now about point of diagnosis even, that very early on in the journey or the pathway, patients are signposted, prescribed, use whatever vocabulary one wishes to make sure that they have access and signposted to these interventions that can help them, and also their care partner. And lastly, in my care plan, I talked about my creative thinking about life, which should inform health and social care practitioners to seek opportunities to keep me fit, to keep me engaged, to keep me stimulated, to keep me empowered and connected and happy and fulfilled. And to be honest with you, I know of no pharmacological treatment that can achieve all of that. And with social prescribing also, just to close, as far as I know, there's no adverse side effects, except maybe when the activity ends or the funding dries up.
You know, I would like to go to Adesola. Is there an equivalent to social prescribing in Nigeria?
Yes, thank you very much. If we look at the Lancet Commission report, social isolation is one of the risk factors for dementia. And what we've done is to look at the individuals who have a lot of social connections in our Indianapolis Ibadan study, compared the amount of social interactions that they have and the cognitive performance against those who have very little. And there was a relationship. The more social interactions people had, the better their cognitive performance and the less cognitive decline. So it's very helpful. And we think that the cultural arrangements in developing countries where you have multi-generational living arrangements in which people of different categories in life live together and family members, it helps social stimulation, and that helps. In addition, when we think about our cognitive stimulation therapy, what we actually do is to bring people together and they relate together in a social group, just like Kit has described. And at the end of the day, we've shown that this makes them better individuals. Their dementia is less, does not progress as rapidly as one would expect, and they seem to do better. So that's the form of social prescribing that we have. So we encourage older folks in our part of the world to be socially engaged, attend events, participate in community activities, and that seems to help reduce cognitive decline and subsequent dementia. And that's our own angle to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Serge, any comments from your perspective in Canada?
Yes, we have tried cognitive training using a structured approach based on neuropsychology. It was targeting initially working memory and then executive abilities. And Keith, you'll be happy to hear it works better if you have a group of 5 with one instructor, because the social interaction helps as much as what you get from the cognitive stimulation. It's harder when you have a larger group if people already have some difficulties concentrating and interacting. But at the mild cognitive impairment stage or very early stage of Alzheimer, it would be certainly doable to have a 5 to 10 group of people with a common language who could interact with a neuropsychologist or someone trained by neuropsychologists for the cognitive training for memory and executive abilities. And you'll be happy to hear that it does impact the brain activity as measured by fMRI a year later. And what we don't know yet is there will be a lasting effect in terms of progression. So I agree with what you said, and I confirm that we've done something randomized. There was a waiting list. People were waiting to get the stimulation. Other people were having it right away. Measure made 6 months, 12 months later. So it confirms exactly what you said, Keith. It works better if you're together, and it works better if it's suitable for the stage of the disease you're at.
So we have a question from Christian Elliott, who's founder and CEO of Care Virtue. Picks up nicely on this conversation, so I will read it to you. So you mentioned social prescribing is quite culturally and geographically specific, yet we've heard this week that in order to raise awareness and educate the community about Alzheimer's disease and interventions available, we need a global movement. Where do you see the opportunities in linking social prescribing across cultures and societies, or learn from one another and adopt new and shared strategies? Would anybody like to address that?
I'll just say a word about that. It's part of what we plan to write about in the World Alzheimer Report 2022. How we can learn from each other's experience after diagnosis, including social prescribing.
Yeah.
We may use videos and testimonies, not just the usual article style report.
Yeah.
Let's go to Keith.
Yeah, I think no matter where you live around the world, you need to retain your physical well-being and health by way of fitness. You need to retain your mental well-being by way of engagement with the arts and culture and other people. The beauty of music is the same whether you're in Africa, Asia, Europe, or America. And the beauty of dance is the same wherever you are in the world. The dancers may be different, the art may be different, but the impact it has upon you, I guess, will be the same.
Yeah.
Adesola.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that if we bring experts together, so you share ideas and look for commonalities, and then we can then develop this further. So it can then become a global thing. So you need to bring people who have practiced this and have shown to work, like Serge and Keith, and from some of our own experience, and maybe even what Mary had said, and then we can put all these ideas together. I think that will help. Thank you.
Mary, do you have a thought?
I do. So I think, to everyone's point, it's very important to think globally. But Adesola, I think something that you've been describing is how we act locally, right? So we reflect the cultural nuances for the environments that surround individuals and their care partners and really the ecosystem. And so that's something that we're very cognizant of, especially because we know that a lot of social listening data and information like that that's gleaned from the internet isn't reflective of all communities. So we're very cautious not to, just broad brush a lot of these insights, but we take them as a foundation, as a trend spotting. And then we ask people from different cultures to say, how does this fit in? Or what is your experience? And what are the nuances? Because I think, to your point, Adesola, and really it's about this conversation, Drew, is we're learning from one another and maybe picking some best practices from cultures and communities and from, clinicians from different backgrounds, and saying, how do we at least elevate the awareness and the education so that people can really create their own plans and their own, path moving forward, just like Keith has done.
Yeah, I agree.
So ADI is a mechanism for sharing globally, I think well suited for this. Mary, I would imagine you would feel that GCAD is a mechanism for sharing of best practices of this nature. Are there any other global mechanisms for sharing that we should know about?
I don't know if the World Health Organization will be able to bring together some of the shared experience we just talked about. I know ADI and WHO are working in partnership, and ADI is closely monitoring if the global plan is unfolding as expected in terms of having most of the countries with a national plan that could include guidelines for non-pharmacological interventions and social prescribing. We may be paying too much attention in some countries to the drug treatments, and they won't resolve by far most of the issues we're discussing today.
So, Drew, to that point, I would say that IPA, or the International Psychogeriatric Association, I think that they've actually shared some non-pharmacologic interventions to support, behavioral symptoms. And maybe there's some learnings gleaned from GAP. I'm sure, in addition to all the direct disease modifying and clinical trial information, there could be some other data that could be gleaned from that rich database of individual and experiences.
Yeah, great ideas. Keith?
Can I just say that when I was diagnosed, I didn't have that care plan that I've described this afternoon. And I asked my consultant, based on my scans, my MRI scans, the PET scans, and all of the assessments that they conducted with me, how long had I got until I would no longer be functioning in a way that I was satisfied within the community. And she gave me an honest answer. Initially, she said she didn't know, but I wasn't accepting that, and I pressed her further. And I said, well, give me some kind of idea, please, based on all of the data and the assessments that you have. And she said, Keith, the best answer I can give you is 3 to 6 years. Now, that was nearly 11 years ago. So I sit with you this afternoon, not wishing to prove her wrong, but really wanting to illustrate that with what we've talked about this afternoon, there is the hope for individuals and communities, and there is every chance that many people can live and perform reasonably well and live reasonably good lives if we put in place the foundations and then build upon it in the way we've talked about today.
That's excellent. I want to read just a comment from somebody who's become a friend, and Hillary Doxford, who's a global advocate, member of the World Dementia Council, incredibly important voice. And she doesn't have a question, but she did want to just write that she totally agrees with the support and everything that's been said. One of the things that she's found to be true is friendships that have grown as a result of having dementia have helped enormously. Just excellent comment. Thank you, Hillary. Thank you for everything you do. We're running out of time, so I would like to go to everybody for one last comment, and we're going to start with Keith, and then we'll go in the same order we did introductions. But before I go to Keith, just a quick question came in. How often should a care plan be updated? I'll let anybody who wants to answer it.
Well, I'll use that as my closing statement, if I can, Drew, please. And my care plan is updated as often as I need to update it, and that is often, but it's actually officially and formally updated every 4 months.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us today. Serge.
Yes, unfortunately, every 4 months would not be realistic for most people. One of the limiting factors right now for care is the time availability for clinicians, especially those who subspecialize in dementia care. So my plea is that we broaden the scope of people who can help other health professionals like nurse practitioners, perhaps make best use of the data already available in the ADI and other websites. So it's more talked about early in the course of disease, so people can take advantage of that information.
Thank you, Serge, and thank you for all your great comments today. Let's go to Mary.
Just some final words. I think it's a very exciting time in Alzheimer's and dementias. We did have, a product that was recently approved in the United States. It has certainly, I think, created a wonderful conversation around this condition that we haven't seen in quite some time. I think it's created some hope and greater interest, if you will, from the community at large. And what I hope is that as we progress as, a human race, through this journey, that we understand that this disease is really complex, and it's not just cognition, but we appreciate all aspects of the condition, and that awareness is made so that individuals and their care partners, their family members can plan adequately, whether it's every 4 months or whatever that might be, that's ideal and possible, so that they can plan for the future, just like Keith has done. And I think that we've seen this in other conditions, whether it's HIV/AIDS, cancer, cardiovascular disease like heart failure. I mean, families are afforded the time, whatever time they have, to really understand sort of the sequelae and the consequences of the condition, so they can plan. And I think if we can approach that with Alzheimer's and dementias, that would be ideal as well.
Thank you, Mary. Great closing comments, and thank you for all your thoughts on this panel. Adesola, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me start by thanking you for this opportunity to have a voice from low and middle income countries. to present our own perspectives. Things are not as easy as they are in the high-income countries, but we've learned a lot and we continue to change and adapt as the situation demands. With regard to care plans, this will change according to the progression of the disease and appearance of new symptoms and availability of more knowledge and facilities for managing cases. In low and medium income countries, we still rely on education, tackling the risk factors for disease, the ones that are amenable to treatment, so that we can reduce the burden of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Once again, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Adesola. Thank you for being such a powerful voice in Nigeria and globally. I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here with us today and contributing to Lausanne VIII and for the fantastic insights. I'm going to turn it over to George Bradenberg now. George, over to you.
Thank you, Drew, and thanks to everyone on that panel for a rich and empathic and informative conversation. We've heard this year from a number of speakers about the need to actually really engage the patient population around the world in order to begin to create a global movement of voices from the people living with dementia and their caregivers and the families and friends that are affected by this disease. And so one of the takeaways that at least I've taken on board is our need to work over the next year to find more opportunities to better integrate the voices of our community into the institutional arrangements that we're seeking to create around the world, and to motivate those institutions which are focused at the moment on COVID and on other health issues to focus on the extraordinary breadth and depth of the impact of this disease on families around the world. So we will welcome a dialogue with all of you on this panel and others, how best to amplify the critical perspectives of people living with the disease, their caregivers, their families, and their friends, really to galvanize a global movement around the issues that we're experiencing.